Top 10 Horrifying Facts About the Topeka Insane Asylum. Number 10, Topeka State Hospital Room 18. Newspapers from the late 1800s were filled with reports on the abuses happening inside the insane asylum at Topeka State Hospital. In one particular case, a witness came forward with information about an inmate named Dodd. The witness claimed that he had seen an attendant kick Dodd on numerous occasions. Dodd was often knocked to the ground, and the attendant would jump up and down on the inmate's chest. Sometimes, Dodd would be strangled on his final beating. Dodd was knocked down, and the witness stated that Dodd was dragged into room 18. The door was shut, and the witness heard noises that sounded like a struggle. Finally, he heard a groan from within the room, and Dodd was eventually carried out, dead from whatever had happened inside the room. A county attorney tried to take action against the attendant, but the governor of Kansas refused to launch an investigation into the death, and the matter was dropped. Number 9, Killing off Old Soldiers. In 1896, reports came out that old soldiers were being killed off in Kansas state asylums. It should have been a scandal, but instead of being investigated, the whole thing was covered up. According to one newspaper report, Gust Mora, an inmate at the Topeka State Hospital, was sent home with 2 black eyes, a broken nose and a broken neck, his body being accompanied by a certificate from the superintendent that he had died of apoplexy, yet no effort was ever made to right the wrong, and the superintendent is still in office. Number 8, Starved to Death. In the spring of 1911, charges were filed against the Topeka State Hospital that were supposed to lead to an investigation. The charges were made by former and current employees about the condition and treatment of the patients trapped inside the hospital. A local newspaper printed part of a letter that was presented to the board. I wish to make the statement that John Green, a patient in Ward E2, lay ill in bed for 8 days and died, and during this period he was given no food or medicine. His condition was reported every morning and nothing was done. The body of Green was taken to the dissecting room, his brain taken out and used in a demonstration by Dr. T.C. Biddle before a class in the chapel the next day without the consent of Green's relatives. Biddle wanted the brain to demonstrate the condition of a congested brain. Attendants Roberts and Johnson could not be convinced, as they well knew the patient came to his death by starvation. Number 7, Treated like a Dog. One witness to the abuse happening at the state hospital wrote about a patient named Mr. Smith, a former banker. While the statement didn't give the reason why Smith was placed in the hospital, his treatment was completely uncalled for. Smith was often seen wearing handcuffs. His attendant also saw fit to lead Smith around the property with a rope tied around his neck. Sometimes, the attendant would get drunk and beat Smith mercilessly. Another time, the attendant tied Smith to a tree and left him there for hours. On one occasion, it was witnessed that the attendant threw the end of the rope over a door and pulled Smith's head up to the top of the door, cruelly strangling him as some sort of punishment. Number 6, Restricted Visitations. People who were sent to the Topeka State Hospital were often never seen again by the outside world. It was easy to forget about relatives and unwanted spouses once they were on the inside. However, visitations to those who were loved were severely restricted. Out of the 29 wards in the hospital, visitors were only allowed in 4 of them. Parents were not allowed to visit their children inside the hospital. Friends of inmates were also not permitted inside and had 0 visitation rights. Biddle, the hospital supervisor, claimed that visits would interfere with the patient's treatment. Number 5. Lock you up and take your stuff. In 1911, it was announced that a claim adjuster was looking into the financial condition of all the inmates of state hospitals and of relatives bound by law to maintain them. The Topeka hospital wanted more money than was being given by the state. In fact, the hospital had already begun taking families to court and had won a case the previous year, in which the Supreme Court ruled they could recover for the care of an inmate from the time of his admission until the time of his death. The hospital wanted something similar to the Lunacy Act of Ontario, Canada, wherein the asylum would be permitted to take over the patient's estate and pool from it all the funds required to care for the inmate. Number 4. Lawyer vilified. To say that no one was trying to fight the abuses occurring in the hospital would be a lie. Many lawyers attempted to take on cases or initiate investigations into the claims of abuse, but they were always stonewalled. Mr. Hansen, a lawyer, tried to secure the release of several patients in the Topeka hospital. He was unsuccessful, and his patients were returned to captivity without receiving an examination or a hearing. To add insult to injury, the Attorney General filed suit against Hansen for harassing the state officials in charge of the Topeka State Hospital and, to prevent him, from disturbing the patients at the hospital. Number 3. Insanity increases. In 1916, there was a report that insanity was on the increase in the state of Kansas. The state totaled 4,311 cases of insanity, with 1,565 of the afflicted being stored in the Topeka State Hospital. It was big business to declare someone insane, especially when the state could take over the property owned by the patient. For example, there was a big property case in 1918. A Potawatomi Native American woman was declared mentally sick and was being held at the Topeka State Hospital. She also happened to own a sizable estate in Oklahoma. The woman's guardian was in charge of the estate, but Kansas wanted it for the woman's care. Efforts were made through the courts and the newspapers to vilify the woman's guardian, claiming that the guardian was looting the property when, instead, the state of Kansas should be allowed to take over and profit from the estate. Number 2. Back from Incurable. Fast forward a few decades, and we find that there were still many problems at the hospital. A 55-year-old woman was placed in the Topeka State Hospital in 1932. It was claimed that she suffered from delusions and believed that her husband was trying to kill her. In turn, she made an attempt on his life after a year in the hospital. The doctor said she was getting better but still suffered from delusions. After 4 years, the doctor claimed that she had a tendency to hurt other people and could not be paroled. At 9 years, she was labeled incurably insane. That might have been the end for this woman, known as Mrs. X, but a new doctor took an interest in her. After being in the hospital for 17 years, she was still spry. Encouraged, the new doctor began to spend a half hour with her each week and found that with this little bit of attention, she began to settle down. After 5 months of this treatment, Mrs. X, now 72, was paroled and began work as a practical nurse and companion housekeeper. While the good doctor was not prepared to admit that all patients would react positively to a bit of weekly acknowledgement, he did state that doctors should slow down on the brain surgeries and shock treatments given to often neglected patients. Number 1. Confined by mistake. John Crabbe was a Danish immigrant to the United States and barely spoke any English. He worked as a dishwasher in Topeka and was known to have a bit of a hot temper. One night in 1931, a co-worker began hitting on one of the waitresses, who just so happened to be Mr. Crabbe's girlfriend. Crabbe made verbal threats and was taken to jail for his behavior. While in jail, the man sulked and refused to eat. An expert was brought in and labeled Crabbe insane. Crabbe was taken to the Topeka State Hospital, where he was imprisoned as an incurable for almost 20 years. During his time on the inside, Crabbe tried his hardest to convince the staff that he was sane, but one of the reasons they thought he was insane was that he tried so hard to prove he was sane. This ticked Crabbe off even more, and he refused to cooperate with the staff and refused to do any work. Mr. Crabbe might have died in the hospital if it had not been for a group of Danish insurance men who learned of his case. They went to the authorities, and Crabbe was tested again. This time, he was labeled sane, but it took another 10 months before the hospital finally released him. In 1950, Elizabeth, a former Pennsylvania native, recently moved to the beautiful state of Massachusetts, where she is currently involved in researching early American history. She writes and travels in her spare time.